Well, let's get started. Good morning to everyone, wherever you are, morning, evening, afternoon, middle of the night. We'd like to welcome everyone to our Tuesday gathering. These are held on the second and fourth Tuesdays every month, except last part of July and August. So we're really just coming back from that summer break. So our chalice lighting this morning, I've got a little candle here. And a little ICUUW chalice, like on our logo. Our chalice lighting is a song rather than a reading. As long as you're muted, join in if you know the song. We'll do it 4 times. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending. Again, good morning. My name is Gretchen Oman. I live in Southwest Michigan on the ancestral lands of the Potawatomi peoples. My pronouns are she, her. I'm an older white woman with short brownish hair, and I have on a blue flower pattern shirt, and I'm wearing glasses. I am also your ICUUW Marketing and Communications Director, plus some other full disclosure roles that I'll tell you about as we get into the presentation. I've been a UU since 1984, so about 40 years, and all that time I've belonged to a small UU fellowship in my local community. Along the way, I've also participated in a bunch of other UU organizations, especially our UU women's groups, and that's developed into an area of study for me, and I'll be sharing some of that with you in the presentation. I first came to a UU women's retreat when a couple of women in my congregation said, "Oh, we go to this thing every year and it's great and you should come with us." So they were all excited about this. And over the course of a couple of years, kept reminding me, yeah, let's go to this retreat. It's not too far away. So one year I finally bopped up to them and said, "Well, I'm all signed up, I'm going." And they looked at each other and they looked at me and said, "Oh, we're not going this year." So I ended up going to this retreat by myself and not having been involved in any kind of gathering of women before. A lot of trepidation. I was going through a shy streak, at least at that point. But when I got there, the welcome was so warm. And I immediately had someone, pretty much put her arm around my shoulder and say, "Hey, come on, let's go to this," while they're doing that. And I felt a part of the community that they were building immediately. So that's something that I have looked for and found in many of the UU women's groups that we have, especially around the United States. I haven't been an international traveler yet, but as a part of an international group, I think that'll happen at some point. So when I talk to other UUs about ICUUW in specific, or any of our other UU women's organizations, a lot of people say, "What? I never heard of it. I don't know what that is." So to me, it sounds like it's part of that alphabet soup of UU organizations with all the letters. And you kind of need a scorecard to tell the players. And I'm hoping we can sort of build that scorecard today. Let's start right here with our own ICUUW. And again, you probably all know quite a bit about our organization, but this is a brief overview. Our first international gathering was in 2009 in Houston, Texas, and several hundred women were gathered in a really big conference center. It was largest gathering of UU women in quite a long time when that happened. Most of the things that we did were just for the first time, and some of the things like raising money for programs in other countries and having the global sisters conversations, those have continued to this day. Most of the women in the pictures that I have found here are members of the Southwest UU Women Organization. They dedicated their time and effort to this bigger convocation instead of having their usual regional gathering that year. So we had a lot of like UU rock star speakers like Carolyn McDade, who's a UU composer or was UU at the time, and Margot Adler, Reverend Rebecca Parker, Emma's Revolution. It was a really full lineup. So of the 4 or 5 days of convocation that was going on, there was so much happening. One of the significant things is that participants met 4 times during the event in these Global Sisters groups, and they were led by facilitators who got training just, prior to the convocation. The Global Sisters process is a group decision-making process, and it's modeled on community capacity building. The process brings interested parties together to talk in small, facilitated groups, and that's in order to build a shared understanding of issues impacting their lives and to prioritize the issues that they identify and significantly set up action plans to address them. So the Global Sisters groups identified 3 focus areas: education, healthcare, including reproductive justice, and preventing violence against women and children. There were also 2 key concepts that were identified, which were empowering women in decision-making and reducing poverty. Those 2 were viewed as overriding topics, and they ended up being considerations and priorities when putting theory into practice in each of those other 3 focus areas. So many of you are familiar with ICUUW's current programs, and of course there's a lot more information, details on our website and in our YouTube channel, and you can see by this map that's on our website, there's plenty of places where we have devoted a lot of time, energy, and treasure. ICUUW was established as a nonprofit organization after the first convocation, and it's also a non-governmental organization or an NGO in special consultative status with the United Nations. At this point, it's the only UU organization working internationally that has an office at the United Nations. So there's also a March UN event called the Commission on the Status of Women. And ICUUW is privileged to be able to uplift the work that we do and the work of our partners by presenting programs parallel to that event. So this is from 2024's UN event. And here's a brief look at who was presenting and the programs that were that ICUUW sponsored. And here's a few slides just touching on some of our project partners and some of the things ICUUW has done and are doing. And of course, we also host several different membership gatherings with influential speakers, and these Tuesday gatherings, which have various topics depending on who's slated to speak and what we're interested in as a group. And not to mention the international convocation that comes up every few years. The fourth convocation in Romania has just wrapped up, and like we were saying earlier, Facebook has been buzzing with lots and lots of really great photos of the women that are attending and the things that are going on there or have been going on. And I'm sure we're going to get full reports most likely at our Tuesday gatherings. ICUUW's current board includes women from 5 continents. Tina's our current president. You're all probably familiar with Karen Court. She was our immediate past president. And Jofi, who's our executive director. And here's a picture of Nikki, who's our bookkeeper, whom we don't see very often. And again, full disclosure, I'm marketing and communications director for ICUUW. We are a membership organization, so joining is entirely possible. You go to our website and find where it says membership, and you can join or renew your membership at any time. And there's several different levels that you can join at. And if you can get your phone to work on the QR code that's on here, that'll take you right to our website. I'm going to move on to another organization that's relatively new. It's becoming international. It's called Sister Source, and they're, of course, at Sister Source with the 2U's.org. And it's focused on resources for Black UU women and girls. And it is led by Reverend Elder Kiamaraman, a UU minister. She has, speaking of Facebook, if you follow her or a Sister Source on Facebook, you can see that she's been traveling and visited several countries on the African continent and spent a lot of time in Kenya, where she's connected with UU women, a lot of local women, and had many, many conversations with women there, asking about their needs and their hopes for their lives. So they've some historical resources and are working to, encourage greater activity around resources that benefit Black UU women and girls. Reverend Kiama has also edited this book called The Rough Side of the Mountain. I've read it, and I really highly recommend it, especially if you're at all interested in UU history or herstory. There are stories from Black UU women ministers, and it provides a perspective that I think has been lacking or, really underrepresented in some of our UU history presentations. Their website includes a blog, so there are some well-known UU women writers contributing to that. So there are lots of resources for everyone included on the Sister Source website. It's really beautifully done. The next group I'm going to get into is UU Women in Religion. And full disclosure, I'm currently co-convener of this continental group, and I've been involved for a bunch of years. This group started in the 70s with that wave of feminist movement after the passage of the Women and Religion Resolution at the 1977 General Assembly. And as you can see, I believe this first gathering in 79 was all UU women ministers, and there weren't very many at the time. So the text of the resolution is here. You can find it on uuwr.org and also on the UUA website if you look up resolutions for benefiting women. But basically, we were all called to examine sex role stereotypes and gender roles and see where the religious roots of those came through and influenced society, and specifically our UU organizations. So there was a lay leader by the name of Lucille Longview. She passed in 2014, but she was the driving force behind getting this resolution going. It had been something that she had kind of gleaned from some of the international organizations that she was involved with, such as Women's International League for Peace and Freedom and IALRW, International Association of Liberal Religious Women, both of which I believe are still running today. She got a lot of input from congregations and women around the US before putting this resolution together, and they refined it and honed it down to the final language that was finally accepted. And it was a unanimous resolution. So along the way, she had built up support for this. UUWR actually has a website devoted to Lucille and the story, and it's pretty much her own writings. It's a website called Lucille's Red Notebook. .org. One of the results of this resolution ended up being the 1985 revisions on the UU principles and sources, what we've called the 7 principles. And this was really the beginning of more inclusivity in the statements that we make about our faith tradition. Another one was the water ritual. If you do that in your congregation each year, that was started, written by Rosemary Matson and Carolyn McDade. That was started in 1980 at a national gathering of UU women. And obviously they took it to their congregations, and it spread throughout our denomination. People were asking at that time for feminist curricula and resources on women's spirituality. So Reverend Shirley Rank, who was asked to write the first one called Cakes for the Queen of Heaven, that covered European and Near East goddesses and societies that were matrilineal and matrifocal. So there was some research being done by archaeologists at the time, particularly Maria Gimbutas, and her work was sort of discounted by other people in the field. It's been more accepted over the years. So Shirley wrote that, and UUA published it in 1986. Then Liz Fisher, another UU woman who was part of the 70s feminist movement, said, well, okay, so how about the rest of the world? And she proceeded to get grants and write Rise Up and Call Her Name curricula with a lot of help and grants from UU Women's Federation. The UU Women's Federation have always been supportive of a lot of the things that UU women are doing that benefit all of us. So the UUA established task forces for women in religion in each of the 19 districts that we had at the time. You may know that we've consolidated down to 5 regions, so it's a totally different picture at this point. A lot of those groups gathered once, maybe even twice a year in all areas of the country, in all of the districts. And they all have their own flavors. Some of them are very women's spirituality and goddess oriented, some much more social justice oriented. So there's a good variety of gatherings that we have. During that period of time, our groups wrote and published lots and lots of newsletters and journals and books. One of the things that UU Women in Religion does is we try to keep some of these things in publication, like this particular book. Much more of the documents like this Sophia Journal and some of these newsletters have been deposited at Meadville Lombard Theological School in Chicago area. And they have a special collection called Heresies or Heresies that features UU women, our groups, and individuals as well. So at one point, the UUA leadership decided that women's equality had been achieved. Yeah. And they defunded the office that was supported the task force groups. So most of them looked to their districts for help, became maybe a standing committee of a district so that there was still a women in religion group and gatherings and publications still running. And then by 2007, all of the 60 plus groups, like the UU men's group, which folded after this, they were disaffiliated by the UUA. So there was some sort of disconnect where the UUA was saying, we have one staff person, they can't deal with all of you, so we're going to eliminate that staff position. So not all of the groups that were set up as WR task forces survived. Some of them, like I said, tucked into their districts, and others formed their own nonprofit groups. And in some form or another, they've morphed, but in some form or another, many of them are still going today. There are over a dozen UU women's retreats happening in the US and Canada, and I'm just going to flip through this real fast because there's a bunch more I could tell you about these groups. But you can find out more by looking at their websites as well. Southwest UU Women, as you can see, is still going after launching the International Convo in 2009. And Women in Religion PCD, Pacific Central District, is actually the only one continuously existing that came out of one of those task forces. So Midwest has lots of things going on. There are some camps too who hold women's retreats each year that aren't necessarily women's organizations, but they make sure that there's space once or twice a year for us to gather. So UU Women in Religion also took on the task of publishing the revised CAKES curriculum, and we now have the rights to over 24 works by UU women. So part of the reason the organization exists is to keep these publications and newer ones in circulation and available for the groups in your congregation. So that built into a little store. It's kind of a UU Women's Etsy sort of thing. So several of us go around to, we exhibit at GA and also go around to some of the retreats that we can get to so that we can make sure people know about the curricula and the books. This is the current board or core group of UU Women in Religion. You notice that there are no staff people. So it's completely volunteer. The next one on the list is UU Women's Federation. It's the oldest of our UU women's organizations. We're going to fly through a little bit of their history. This, of course, is a couple of years old, but over 60 years as UU Women's Federation is a milestone. But they also had two predecessor organizations in the Unitarians and the Universalists. And this brief bit of history was compiled by Ellen Spencer, who was executive director of UU Women's Federation for quite a long time until she retired. And then she passed several years after that. In 1869, so a long time ago, Universalist women formed the Women's Aid and Centenary Association, and that was later renamed to AUW. There are still AUW chapters around the country. And Unitarian women in the 1880s also formed their own group, eventually known as the Alliance of Unitarian Women. In the late 50s, they started a lot of joint activities, including publication of a newsletter called The Bridge. And they were already starting on working towards consolidation of their organizations. So when they consolidated, their new name was the Unitarian Universalist Women's Federation, and they set up office at 25 Beacon Street in the same building as the UUA offices, and traditionally have been the organization, our UU Women's Organization has had the closest contact with UUA leadership. But even UUWF has had to struggle for recognition over the years. More full disclosure, I was on UU Women's Federation board when Ellen Spencer retired, and for a few years it was a working board. So I got into a lot of their history, and together we managed to get all of the records that were in the office in Boston into Meadville Lombard, scanned for internal use for UUWF, and also available through the historical collections at Meadville Lombard. Just a quick list and some pictures of some past presidents. That needs updating. And this is the current staff, according to their website. Antoinette and Ann are here. I've worked with Dana Cater-Robb, who is a wonderful person to hang out with and work with, and she's an administrator for them. And this is their current board. Over the years, UU Women's Federation and UU Women in Religion have worked closely together, sometimes, and sometimes fallen out of partnership. So that those kinds of things and the connections among our organizations go back and forth and round. I see them as focused on justice work. They've recently launched several new opportunities for connecting and networking, along with rebooting their website and getting their membership program going again. And there's also a lot of online gatherings that they host on justice issues and education and equipping us to be good partners. Blessed be, as I extinguish the chalice. Thanks again, everyone.